In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White, where we discuss the issues that are troubling the marginalized and underserved communities and how we can best help to fix those situations. Tonight, we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Sidney Childs. Dr. Childs has served as Chief Diversity Officer at Capital University in Bexley, Ohio, and prior to this role, he was an inaugural Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority in Columbus, Ohio. Dr. Childs views diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, work as his calling and purpose, a passion he discovered early in his career while working with students to create environments that support the success of individuals from marginalized communities. He believes DEI is fundamentally about change management, guiding the transitions of people, systems, and structures within organizations to build a culture of belonging for all stakeholders. Dr. Child has held several senior student affairs positions at Saginaw Valley State University and Bowling Green State University. As an equity-minded leader, he has directed and managed programs focused to access equity, diversity, student success, academic and student support services, and educational opportunity programs. Notably, he served as the interim vice president for student affairs at Bowling Green State University. He is also a national trainer on federal education opportunity legislation, regulations, and student retention strategies, and a consultant specializing in helping organizations align efforts and resources to achieve their strategic goals using best practices. Currently, Dr. Child serves on the board of the Lincoln Theater and has previously held leadership roles such as President of Ohio Trio, formerly OAE OPP, President of the Education Opportunity Association, formerly MAE OPP, and board member of the Council for Opportunity in Education, COE, in Washington, D.C. Dr. Childs earned a Doctor of Education degree in Leadership Studies, a Master of Public Administration degree in Organizational Development, and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration degree in Business Law, all from Bowling Green State University. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to bring to the show Dr. Sidney Childs. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, and good evening from the cold state of Ohio, where we have 5 inches of snow on the ground and maybe getting more.
Oh, wow. That's I think they said the entire Eastern Seaboard is supposed to be having that going on, because here in Atlanta, we've been having 25, 23 degree temperatures in the evenings, early mornings, and now it's only up to 31 degrees today.
Oh, well, that's par for the course here in the Midwest. So, but it's not that bad.
I know that's right. Is there anything you'd like to add to your bio before we jump into the show?
Thank you for that bio, but I would just say the only thing is that I'm passionate about people. I'm passionate about us, my community, the culture, and I think I have the saying, but it's not my saying, but I added a piece to it. I think it's a famous coach or something. He says, if you don't laugh or cry at least once a day, you haven't lived. And I add to it that if you haven't laughed so hard that you've cried, you haven't lived.
Oh wow. See, I like that. So what we're gonna do is when we start this, I'm going to actually go in reverse order because I want to start out with your role in leadership. And I want you to tell us, how do you define effective leadership?
So that's a really good question. And I say I think I'll answer the question by saying this. One of the things that I think that a lot of people talk about when it comes to leadership is that there is one definition or one defined style of leadership. And I'll say to that, I say it's really not that. It's really an eclectic approach to the situation, and that you bring whatever, or you take into consideration whatever is happening at that time, and then you apply the appropriate leadership or approach to the situation. To the question directly, is how I define leadership is meeting people where they're at, meeting their needs, making sure that they have everything that they need to take care of to help them get to whatever objective that they need to go to or that you need to go to. So if you're taken care of, if everything that you need is in place and you feel comfort and you feel, that you're part of it, then my job then is to create that environment for that to happen so you can move forward the direction of the organization, whether it be a private, public, volunteer. I think that's what leadership is meeting people where they're at and helping them go where they want to go, as well as you want the organization to go.
So, a follow up on that is, since we target and we really want to expand and bring up, those that are in the marginalized and underserved communities, what are some of the things that they can do as you define when you define effective leadership? What are some of the things that they can do, or some of the things that they can learn in order to become better leaders?
And you're talking about the community,
Yes.
Yes. So that's an interesting question because oftentimes communities who are under-resourced or minoritized or underserved don't know what they don't know. Oftentimes you don't know what you don't know. And so therefore it's easy for people in power, position, whatever, is to blame people for their situations. And so in order for communities to sort of develop leadership, I think you have to validate, recognize, and support them where they're at so they can see that they can self-identify the leadership skills or the leadership qualities that they have. For example, I used to run a program at a university that was designed to help first-generation low-income students matriculate at the institution. And one of the things that I did in this programs for these students to be eligible in the program, I never reminded the students of those qualifications. I never reminded them, and I had my staff. I said, we are never bringing up that they're first generation. We are never bringing up that they're low income. We're never bringing up that they have academic deficiencies. They're in this program. Fine, they've been admitted to the institution. Now our job is to give them the skills that they need so they can continue on. And so instead of saying, this is who you are, we're saying, this is where you need to be, and this is how we're going to help you get there. And I think that can be applied in any situation. which then I think that becomes more authentic. It becomes meeting people right where they're at and showing them where they need to be. Because at the end of the day, they had a goal. And our goal, their goal was to be successful at the institution, connect to the institution, and get a degree. We can all agree on that. That's what you're there for. Now, we're going to give you the skills to help you get there. And from that, I believe, and I've seen, and my experience was that leadership rose from there, that they took self-responsibility because they had somebody who was supporting them and was, and we were committed to their success.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes there's situations where we're in our communities that we're doing all this wonderful things for them, but we're not including them. We're not telling them. We're not helping them. We're saying, we know what you need. No, 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 no. We're gonna. This is a shared responsibility. This is a shared approach, a partnership to make this happen.
So, can you share a leadership lesson you've learned from a challenging experience?
Oh God, this sounds like an interview. Oh wow, that's a good question. A lesson that I learned from a leadership perspective. So, I'll use a professional experience. I was in a particular organization where I was given the responsibility to bring 4 distinct units together that were going in 4 different directions. And I had a situation where there were some people who were on board. We're talking about change here, organizational change. Some people were on board and some people were not on board. And I thought I knew the way to go. I thought I knew. I was like, this is how it's going to happen. This is the vision, blah, blah, blah. This is where I'm going. And the lesson, and it wasn't going in the way I thought it should go. It was infighting. There was some undermining going on. And what I had to do was remove myself from the situation and bring everybody to the table and say, okay, tell me what your thoughts, what's your vision about what this should look like? Instead of me just coming in and being not autocratic, but just kind of going with the flow and saying this is what I had to step back a bit and ask them, or I should say it this way, pose questions to help them get to the vision that I had in place, not manipulating, but asking the right kinds of questions so they can feel that they were part of the process, as opposed to boom, boom, boom. Here's the plan. I wrote it, got feedback from other people, but didn't get feedback from them. And then, then just let them give me their thoughts about where we should go. And then from there, we developed some norms, if you will, about how we were going to direct it. And I'll say, and in that experience, some people self-selected and said, you know what? I appreciate that, but I'm just not with it. And they decided to do something different.
So, again, as we're speaking about, like the situation in which, for our target audience, or, and our people that are out there listening tonight, when you think of an actual leader, and when we're talking about like, marginalized and underserved communities, I do believe and I do know that there are some people that are in those areas where they've got leaders, but they're silent leaders because they don't really know the effects or the things that they can do to bring about this change.
Right, right.
How do you determine, especially from your experience, as a leader, in higher education, how would you determine, or how would you help someone that's out there in one of these communities that is a leader to help them to understand why they are a leader, and these are some of the things that they should focus on?
Well, I think the first thing is that you have to establish the trust. You've got to, and without getting too academic about all of this, in when you're talking about working in marginalized communities or communities that are underserved, and someone that is perceived to be in a different either class or even a different identity, a certain identity, working with, depending on the community, there's that level of, why are you here? Why are you doing XYZ for me? And so you have to be able to establish the trust. Even, I'll just say, even in our community, we do these unconscious sort of things about testing your blackness. How black are you? Are you down? Are you the man? Are you sellout? What is it? What are you doing? And so we then have to develop that trust to let people know is, first, break down those barriers so those aren't even issues. We don't need to even have that conversation. And the trust, I think building the trust is letting those individuals know that, again, I go back to this shared goal, this shared interest, that individual, you have great skill sets. We need somebody to bring this voice to the table. Your voice is needed. And I'm available to help mentor you if you want it. I don't believe in forcing my mentorship on anyone. Providing that opportunity for them to be mentored. Recommending experiences for them to take part of. So, for example, if I see somebody who has great potential to describe the experiences of a group, then we're going to give them that opportunity to do it informally, maybe at a smaller level, and then allow it to get bigger. But give people the opportunity, and then give people the opportunity to fail in a supportive way. I mean, that's kind of what student affairs is. When I was in student affairs, that's what our thing is. We challenge and we support at the same time, and we create the environment where they're able to do it in a way that is not, well, I told you so, or let them fall in their face and they'll figure it out. No, create the environment. So, hey, listen, none of us, I used to tell my students often, I would tell them, none of us had it all together. None of us had it all together. And if we think we did, we are lying to ourselves, and they are lying to you. So guess what? We're going to give you that opportunity. So to answer your question, give them the opportunity, point out those strong points, be authentic, share my own experiences where I fumbled. And somebody called me and said, hey, get it together, and here's some ways. I hope that answers the question.
It does. It does. And, and I hope that, as our audience is listening, is that I'm sure that there are several people, that when we speak of leadership and, with the way you were just explaining it, especially with the opportunity, that some of them can recognize that the skill sets they have are much different than some of the people that they surround themselves with. And so it's like, this would be like an opportunity for them to take that and change that whole focus, change that whole group, and make it what they think it should be in order to help that community.
Right. And I think you're getting onto something else too, is that oftentimes the skill sets may be the same, but there's motivation. There's certain motivations where people want to do something different than what others are doing. And so because they have that motivation, or they have that drive that make them want to do something different, that's that fertile ground to help, where a mentor or somebody who sees something in somebody to help pull them or pluck them out, or either help direct, and then maybe go back and help those who may not have that same sort of drive, if you will, or that mindset or that motivation to want to sort of change their environment. But I always go back to, and maybe maybe to a fault, is that we oftentimes, because someone doesn't have the same drive as someone else, that somehow that person with the less drive is deficient, or something is wrong with them. And I'm a firm believer that there are systems and structures in place that limits someone to even see that they have an opportunity, or that they even have a voice. And I really am grappling with this right now with myself, with the current environment right now, is how do we do this without, how do we do this in a way that helps people realize that you matter, you do, no matter where you at, you do, and you have a voice, and we just need to amplify those voices and give them opportunities to share their situation, where it can make a change and make a difference in somebody's life, in their lives, actually.
So, how do you foster a culture of collaboration and innovation within your team?
How do I foster a culture of collaboration and innovation within my team? So, sometimes I get too pragmatic. So if that's, I get pragmatic. So one of the things that I like to do with my team is twice a year, I like to do retreats. I like to say, listen, we are going away. We're going to go away from either campus or the organization, and we'll be at an all-day place, have an outside person who's a facilitator. And we're going to, I believe, if it's not broke, sometimes you have to break it. You know, they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, my sensibility is, if it's not broken, it's going well, that's fine, but we can critique it. We can reevaluate it. So let's talk about bringing the team together, and let's sort of deconstruct what's going well, what we can do different, and what are some aspirational kinds of things that we want to do. And what happens is you have a facilitator facilitating that. I believe in the SWOT and SCOT analysis approach. I believe in the World Cafe approach, where you kind of look at things from a large scale and you break it down and talk about ways in which we can do things differently. And I think what comes from that is you get a number of things. You get those individuals who are not so vocal, who become vocal. You get people to sort of look at things differently, because they now have that opportunity, and it's being intentional for them to allow them to look at things differently. And that's sort of and then you come together and you figure out where you want to go, you develop goals, strategies, etc. That's sort of the pragmatic approach to looking at innovation and creativity. But the other piece in the day-to-day work is, again, I go back to helping people, letting my staff know that they have a voice. There is no, you're a leader where you sit, not positional, but you're a leader where you sit. And what I mean by that is, I would tell my staff oftentimes, I would say, listen, you are expected to bring your knowledge, skills, and abilities, KSAs, as the HR world says. You are required to bring those to the table at all times. You don't have to worry about, well, I'm not the director or I'm not the vice president. No, you have a set of experiences, whether they're classroom gained or life in place. Bring it to the table, share it, because we have a situation. And then I try to create that environment where everybody feels that Whatever they bring to the table, there is no wrong answer. It may be directed differently, but there are no wrong answers. And let's have that conversation. I try to do that. I try to inspire people to be able to bring themselves to the table. And if it's a not so good idea, it's a not so good idea right now, but that doesn't mean it can't be at some point.
That's true. That's true. I like that. And that in itself, it kind of like, well, in summation of that, does that mean that it makes the situation that much easier where it flows that much more smoothly?
Yes, it does. It flows very smoothly because what the intent, and it doesn't, I don't want to say it always goes right, but generally the intent is you don't have to be afraid to say something. You don't have to be afraid to contribute. You don't have to be afraid to make a fumble. It's okay. No one's going to talk. No one's going to laugh at you because, like I said, none of us got it right. None of us had it all together at all times.
Right.
And build in the culture that, and yes, it might not be so good, but it's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means at that particular time, this was not the response. And I used to tell my staff all the time, a wrong response or an ideal that's not at the right time is not a reflection of who you are as an individual. It is a reflection at that particular point in time about that situation. You are not a bad person because or a whatever because you didn't have the idea. It just wasn't for this time.
Yes, sir. So what strategies do you use to motivate and inspire your team?
What strategies? I try to be as authentic as I possibly can, and I want them to be authentic. I want them to, if they don't have what they need, I want them to tell me what they need. I want my staff, I motivate my staff by making sure that there's flexibility in the workplace. And what I mean by flexibility is you don't, if 8 to 5 doesn't work for you, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I mean, and given that we've come out of a pandemic, it made the conversation much easier now because the work from home. But at the end of the day, everything's on the table for discussion that we can discuss. If we can't talk about it, if I have no ability to make the change, then I can't. But what we can't talk about, let's talk about it. I've had, and the reason why I'm looking at those kinds of things is because those are the pieces that if people don't feel like they're being heard or their needs are being taken care of, they're not giving you all, they're checking out, they're leaving. So I try to the motivation there is let me help you meet the needs that I can meet. The other strategies that I put in place is I give clear expectations. I try to give, I'll say it that way. I try to make my expectations clear professionally in terms of how you will approach the work, even sort of values that we have value in the organization. The organizational values as well as the departmental values. I have conversations about those. So you are clear on what the expectations are. And then if those values are not being aligned, we might have to have a conversation about that. But I try to create an environment where people feel that they can meet the goals of the organization while their goals are being met at the same time, and no surprises. Yeah. Meet them where, again, it's like we do our students, meet them where they're at, meet our staff where they're at. And again, put incentives in place for folks. And you can have, I have direct incentives, whether it be, merit and all that kind of stuff, or those indirect incentives like, flexibility with schedules, flexibility with professional development, all kinds of things to help the staff person do or help the team meet the goals of the organization.
So how do you handle conflicts or disagreements within your team?
How do I handle conflict? Well, first of all, I'll say I do not mind conflict. I address it head on. And I try to have the conversation immediately because, as I said earlier, I like to put expectations out there very clearly. So when the conflict arises, we can look at, okay, where are we unclear at on expectations? Where are we unclear on where did we go wrong? And when I mean where did I contribute to it? Maybe I contribute to the conflict, and you have to be able to talk about where you may have contributed, and then from there we're going to come up with a solution. That's how I approach it. What's the issue? What's your contribution to it? What's my contribution to it? And then let's figure out where the gap is, and let's figure out how we can alleviate that so we can move forward.
So then you're continuing the team concept and the team process. Exactly.
Because often now there are conflicts that sometimes that you just have contrary folk. We got every organization has folks who just show up and they just come to work to be messy. That's their side hustle. Their side hustle is to come and be messy. There is that. But then there is the messiness of work where you miscommunicated or you misunderstood or there's a misalignment. These can be fixed. It can be fixed. And so we're going to do this together. Now, if there's some responsibility, if I have to help you see your responsibility, I will do that as well. Sometimes people don't want to take responsibility, but I am very comfortable with saying, no, I want you to hear what you're saying. I want you to understand what you're saying and how that's being played out and how one could see that. And I want you to hear me, and I can understand how you may have misunderstood, or understood it a certain way. Listen to understand, not listen to be right. Listen to understand. And then I ended by, what are the consensus? What are we agreeing on? What are we going to agree on, and how are we going to change the behavior or change it so we change the situation where we can both go at it? There's a number of examples of how that played out, but we don't have that much time to go, and I guess I don't want to shame the guilty.
What role does empathy play in your leadership style?
Empathy is very important, very important. And full disclosure, sometimes empathy is a challenge for me. I'm gonna do a full disclosure. I'm being vulnerable in this here podcast. I'm being a little vulnerable. Empathy is sometimes a challenge for me because I think I do a good job of putting expectations out there and letting folks know where it's at. And oftentimes I should say, and I shouldn't say oftentimes, but at times when a person isn't able to meet those expectations and everything's been laid out as crystal clear as I possibly could, I got agreement that you understood, and then it's not working out. I sometimes challenge the empathy piece is sometimes challenging for me, and then when those cases happen, I have to you know, get counsel from a more empathetic person because to help me understand it. Now, I haven't had anything that's so egregious that I'm just like cold stone. It's just, it's
Right.
just some things that
Right.
like I'm still confused, but I hear you and I understand. But at the end of the day, we still have what we have to have done. We still got a
Exactly.
team, or we gotta. So sometimes that becomes I have to get a better understanding of that. With that being said, um, that doesn't change that doesn't change what has to happen. If that my delivery can be a little little less empathetic, but at the same time, it still needs to be said.
Right. And so, and I think, just when it comes down to leadership, and, just, you can correct me, but I think when it comes down to leadership, though, I mean, I know that, people can be empathetic. Okay. But I think sometimes delivery from a lot of folk just comes across as not being empathetic,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know.
But and I agree, and I think so. I'll say this. My experience is that sometimes in our perception of being not empathetic, when leaders are not being empathetic, it is because oftentimes people want to be manipulative. They
Mhm.
want to manipulate. They want you to. They want to cast you as um, this non-feeling, stoic, cold person. And that's
Mhm.
not necessarily the case. Sometimes you got to keep the main thing the main thing. And some people, our intention is to derail you from the
Yeah.
main thing.
Yeah.
And, and I think and I used to tell my staff that if you're not able to do and perform managerial and supervision functions, which I think sometimes this is national. I better be careful how I say it. Sometimes, if you're not able to do traditional and managerial and supervision, managerial and
Supervisory.
supervisory, responsibilities, that can limit your progression into certain positions because sometimes you've got to make those hard decisions, and if you can't make them because of you don't want to be perceived as a bad person, then that is can be difficult. That can be a hazard to your
Mhm.
success
You
if you
know,
want to be upwardly mobile.
then so let's take that like one step lower, because I just love what you just said. That was the thing that just caught me. What you just said is like, when you get those kind of people, now does that mean that they're not leadership material, or does that mean that they're probably being placed in a position that they're just plain and simply just not ready for?
Both things can be true. So I
Mhm.
would say there are some people that may not, and I don't want to say leadership, um, they may not be ready for that type of responsibility or that leadership role, which
Mhm.
requires that skill set to be in place. I will
Mhm.
never say I'm one of those people that I don't believe. I believe leaders are born and made. There is not this either or. They are
Mhm.
both and.
Mhm.
So that's and there are some folks out there. I have some contemporaries that think that leaders are born and not everybody can be one. I disagree with that. I think you can train people to be leaders. And I think there are some people with innate born leadership talents and skills and abilities. But to your question, they may not be at the leadership maturity level to be able to do it, but that can be taught.
Okay.
You can get to that point. I go back to the same. Every good leader wasn't great and good their whole life. They had to learn those skill sets. You have to. I mean, I wasn't always good at it.
But and see, that's just the thing. I think it's like we're growing up as little flowers, or we're like from when we're children growing into adulthood or growing into manhood.
Right.
It's like there's that process. And so let's just take it from the male perspective.
Okay.
Because, and as they go with this scientific thing that a man's mindset does not mature until he reaches 30. When he reaches 30, he stops being a little boy and he stops doing little boy things, supposedly, quote unquote.
Quote, yeah.
And so now we know that that's not the case for every man, but the majority, yes, because you have some men that are just boys the whole time and that's all they're going to be as a little boy. Now, when he reaches that 30-year mark, is when the maturation sets in, his whole mindset changes, and he learns, or he knows from this point that now I've got to be this responsible man and I've got to make good decisions in order to make my life better and to bring better people into my life to make it that much better, and it keeps growing exponentially. Okay. Now, in that case, let's say you got 10 men. And with that scenario, you're going to have 2 of them that's just not going to make that. They're not going to make that cut. This 8 are now on that path. So with them being on that path, and let's say you can see all the different leadership skills in these 8 men, right? These 8 young men. Now, as that develops, which they need mentorship, how do we actually take these 8 young men and we prime them for the next level? Right. What do we do and how do we do that?
So I think there's a number of ways in which that can be done. One is so I want to unpack this a bit. So how do I want to respond? So the 8 men who are fully developed or getting into their sort of maturation, that sort of adult development, lifespan development, etc. Just because I'm for this example, I'm just want to make sure I got to process this while I'm talking to you. So forgive me a little bit.
No problem.
So these 8 men who are adults,
right,
and they have developed. The assumption is that all 8 of them are have identified as being leaders, and they have it. We're okay. They're ready to go.
They're primed. So we just gotta mentor that mind, and we got to get it all together so they can actually get to that next level.
Right. And so I think you individually, one, those 8 need to be ready, and also they need to be cognizant that they need it, because oftentimes, if you look at your 30-year-old self, my 30-year-old self, which was just a few years ago. My 30-year-old self, I should say, may not have been as prepared as I thought I was. Okay, there's that. And I would say Oh gosh, that's a hard question because I don't. It's hard for me to answer it because the scenario isn't that linear. It's never that linear. It's never that. Um, and it's
It's
hard for me
that
to get my head
cut and
around
dry.
it.
It's
It's
not
never
cut and
that
dry.
cut and dry. It's never that scenario. Never. What you have is you have ebbs and flows, even with the two who didn't
Right.
get it. There's
Right.
ebbs and flows. So it's hard, and I have I'm not. Yeah, my sensibility, my Myers Briggs, my all of that tells me to. I can't talk in absolutes.
Right.
That's it's really hard for me to answer this question that way. But,
Okay.
but for the sake of the question, I'll say it this way. There are those 8 men can join certain types of organizations to help develop their skill set. Those organizations can be intentional about uh, developing or having. I worked at an organization once where if you're about 30, you were about mid manager, where we had a organizational leadership institute where we were uh, we handpicked or they self-identified and we selected certain people to go through this leadership training program so they can be prepared for the next level. Um, Even in our
Right.
communities, we have networks where men can join to become better community leaders or more community minded. We have, if you didn't join a Divine Nine organization as an undergrad, you can join it at the graduate level or the alumni level. So there are a number of opportunities where men, particularly Black men, who are at that age who want to further their development can take advantage of. Um, uh, I mean, and you see them if they're on LinkedIn or um, um, LinkedIn or Facebook or other platforms. There is the my a colleague of mine, Jewel Love, has an organization called Black Executive Men. I believe it's Black Executive Men. I mean, there are just a number of things that you can do and put in place that that gets you there. I hope I'm answering the question.
Well, just in all, I think it's like when we think about that empathetic situation, and you talk about that manager. What I was pretty much just trying to get to is that when you said that they are just maybe that role might be too big for them and that it might not be a place where they need to be. I was simply trying to make the comparison of the 30-year-old young man, that's at that point of maturation where he's actually putting it
Okay.
together. He doesn't have it all together, but he's putting it
Hmm.
together. So a lot of those decisions he's not going to be able to make because it's too big. That's too much on the plate. And so I think like when you was talking about that particular manager, that don't want to be looked at as a bad person, and wanting to be empathetic, is because leadership is leadership. And I think for some people it's kind of hard to actually come back to this person and say, okay, look, this is the way it goes. Because some people do really don't want people to say, oh, he's such a
Right.
bad person. And you're not a bad person. But if you don't fix it, then it continues to spiral out of
Right.
control. So that's the purpose of being there, is because hey, you got to nip that in the bud
Right.
right now.
And I'm following you now. And I'm sorry if I went way off somewhere. But what helps that is if I believe if management and supervision is right, you have established a
Mhm.
relationship with that individual where you can have those conversations early on, and
Mhm.
it's just part of the culture. What I try to do with
Mhm.
my staff is when I meet with them, I would say, okay, Here's our agenda. But then I also want to know what's going on in your life. But I also want to add in there, I'm going to give you some feedback on where I think you could work on, not just use the feedback at performance evaluation. Your performance evaluation is going on all the time, because everybody who our HR friends will tell you, there should not be any new issue brought up at the performance evaluation time. There should not be anything new. You should be having these ongoing conversations. And in that relationship, and I'll say this, particularly for Black and Black folks in leadership, we've got to be able to take the risk to tell a brother or a sister, these are the challenges that I see, or these are the great things that I see, and take the risk and take the risk of hopefully that 30-year-old doesn't come back and be like, oh no, they didn't. You know, because that happens. And sometimes, and I will say this, and this is sometimes a fault in our community, we won't do it because we don't want to be that person that looks like we are we don't want the perception to be that we're not, we're hating. And so we sometimes don't do it. And sometimes we do it. We don't do it at the concern that we don't want to be perceived as the person being hired to get the Black folks in check, who are staff. You know, all of that plays into that sort of mentorship and being empathetic about how we deliver and what we share. Because my experience over my almost 30 years of experience is that I've seen that play out in multiple ways. And I'll give you an example. There was a staff member at an organization. He was in another department, but he went up for, there was an opening and he applied for the director position. I think it was an assistant or associate, or maybe a director position. And it was a brother, and his supervisor was a woman of color. And he went up for it and he was like, yeah, I'm good. I've been here a while. It should happen. And he didn't get it. And I said, well, he came and asked me some questions about it. And he said, well, what? I said, well, what happened? What did they? Well, they said this, and this. And I said, and my immediate response was this the first time you're hearing about this? Is this the first time you received that feedback? And he said, yep. And I said, well, I'm sorry, that's the first you've heard of that feedback, because sometimes that information is put in people's files, and they use and you never know it, and you're held to some accountability and some responsibility and some expectations you don't even know you held to until sometimes a gatekeeper decides to share it with you when you could have known it all along and been working on it. So when it was the time you could say, oh, I'm ready, because I've checked these concerns that they have, and I'm ready for it. But if you knew ahead of time and you weren't ready, don't be surprised you didn't get it now. That's the flip side.
Right. Exactly.
And so that's why I try to be I keep going back. I try to be as clear and upfront as possible, and give people and provide an opportunity for people to thrive, get the help they need. I'm a mentor. I tell people, I will mentor you. I said, that is not my responsibility. That is not in my job responsibility. But if you want it, I will give it to you. You can take it or you can leave it. And that also tells me how we will engage. Because some people don't want your mentorship. They got it all together. And certain generations of people think they have it all together. Okay, you got it together. Carry on. You good? I'm good. You good. But you're going to come back around.
Yes, sir.
And that has happened multiple times.
They'll definitely be back.
They will be back.
How do you ensure that all voices are heard and valued in decision-making processes?
By default, I am a collaborative leader. I take a collaborative approach by default, sometimes to a fault. I'm very collaborative. And I will make sure that the right voices are heard in whatever we are moving forward. It is unrealistic to have all voices heard, but I will make sure I'm intentional that the right voices are heard so we can move in the direction that we need to go. And what I mean by collaborative, I use words like this. This is where we're going. Poke holes in it. I don't care. It's not personal to me. I want you to poke holes in it, because if you do that, then that is a perspective that I may have missed. I try to make, in addition, I try very hard to hire to my weaknesses. Because like I said, I ain't got it all together. I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not so good at. And so guess what? The team will be reflective of that.
Right.
So we can have the collaboration, because if you have a strong skill set here, guess who's getting called on?
Okay.
You know what I mean? And if I have a skill set, I am very confident in what I'm good at. I am very confident what I'm not so good at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if I have the position and the authority to bring people in, everybody's not so fortunate to bring people to the table and that. But if you're in the position to do that, I'm doing it every day of the week, all day. I don't want 10 of me. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that it is. Can you share an example of a time when you had to make a difficult leadership decision?
Yeah. So there's several, but one that comes right to mind is I was at a university, and we had to it was a personnel issue, and we had to let a staff member go. And as a university, students can respond to those decisions because we encourage activism. We encourage students to do whatever they do. And so the decision was it needed to be done. It took us a lot of steps to get there, but the leadership, I guess I would say the leadership piece is that we had to spend countless hours in meetings explaining to the students why we had to do what we did and not violate the staff person's rights as a personnel, because those aren't public records. I mean,
right.
So we had to have a lot of meetings, and I guess what was difficult about it is that I had to walk on campus every day, and a number of students were looking at me like, no, he didn't do that to him. No, he didn't. And helping them And I had to meet with students individually and in collective groups, explaining to them the process and walking through that and I guess personally it was difficult for me because I had to spend a lot of time responding to something that would just be a normal situation that happens in an organization. But because if misinformation and disinformation got out there, there was a lot of conversations about it. And so the difficult piece is we had to do it. We had to respond to it. And we spent a lot of time responding to those students' concerns. And in addition to that, resources were reallocated to priorities that took place that were higher priorities. And yeah, that's about the best I could say it in a way that
I understand, because we don't want to disclose the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how do you stay adaptable and open to change as a leader?
For me, change is, I welcome, I embrace change. Change is always something that I welcome. And there's the trite saying, the only thing that's constant is change.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do live by that particularly working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for a number of years, we know that different generations see things differently. We know that different identity groups see things differently. So built into the work, you're always looking at different perspectives and seeing how it can be tweaked or how it can be better. So change is something that I welcome. Like I said, I believe in staff retreats, and I'm like, y'all, what we need to work on? How can we fix this? I have some thoughts. I want to know your thoughts. At every event I do what is called a plus delta. What went well and what could we have changed? Because guess what? There's always room for improvement. I do it with myself personally. What could I do different? What do I need to work on for this upcoming year? Or what are steps that I need to take to make sure I'm working on that? And kudos to you. This is one of the things that I wanted to do in the upcoming year, is do some kind of public speaking and get out there and sort of tell my story. And so, which means I'm open to it. So, I try to create the environment. I'm always asking why. I make it a point to see both sides, not do both sidisms when folks are clearly wrong. I mean, I try to look at both sides of the coin to help get to where we need to be.
So we're just going to take a little break here. Okay. And we're going to play a word game.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you a word, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
Authentic.
Real.
Motivate.
Movement.
Flexibility.
Adaptable.
Inspire.
Authentic.
Happy.
Life.
Clear.
Pristine.
Values.
Important.
Evaluate.
Feedback.
Development.
Growth.
Fair.
Maybe.
Of all those words, which one stood out most to you as the most important word?
Oh, the most important. Inspire.
Inspire.
I
Okay.
think so. Inspire. Yeah.
And so I just know that, well, as we were talking about leadership, you use most of those terms a whole lot. But the
Uh-huh.
one that you used the most was authentic.
Authentic.
Yeah. And so, so pretty much as I look at that and inspire, I mean, it's pretty much it all rolls around into, the things that you do. And so, and the things that you have done. And so I just, I do that every now and then with a lot of guests when I do the word
Right.
game, and
Right.
so I just wanted to ask that because as we talked about leadership, which I told you I was going to reverse order, is
Right.
because, again, as I said, when I think about the communities that we're actually targeting and so forth, each and every last one of these words has got to have some kind of meaning for them.
Right.
And so that is why I just wanted to ask, you this word association.
But when you asked, I inspired, I said authentic, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
And here's why I say this. And I try to embody this as much as I possibly can. And maybe to a fault. I try to be what you see is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
I really do that because I had read something somewhere that our life experiences really drives who we are as individuals, and our positive experiences as well as our negative experiences. And so as I'm doing personal development work on me, I know that I want to be as authentic as I possibly can, because I don't want any what they say, I'm confusion. I'm confusion.
Definitely don't want that. Definitely don't want that.
I'm confused. I want to be and the reason why I say that is that I think that's what's missing today is authenticity and people being duplicitous. And I think what's going on in our current situation is people are getting the okie doke is winning.
The lies, just put it
The
out
lies are winning, and the lies and I don't mean a person is lying. I'm saying it's almost like we willingly want to be deceived. we are willingly going to the slaughter and don't know we going.
Oh, oof.
Some of us know we are, and then some of us are like, I would prefer to go to the slaughter than to deal with that. And that's where I think, and then I also think but I think there's some pieces that are missing in terms of people playing games. That's what I say of it. Games need to be stopped being played.
Yes, they are,
and
because lives are at stake.
Exactly.
Because lives are at stake. And See, and I'm not afraid to say this, but I've got to say this is because that very thing that you mentioned, that's what the media is doing now, which is causing its own demise. They are putting up with lies and putting out lies. And the lies that they're putting out because they refuse to actually check it and put it in its place, that's creating a problem.
Right.
So now that they're getting smaller and that they're shrinking, now it's like, oh, we're dying. Please help us. We're not doing this. You're a lie because you did it and you're still doing it and you still did not do what you were supposed to do in order to get out to the people what needs to be done.
Right.
That's why people are going to get a bigger dose as time passes by of America in Black and White, which is all about the realness because it's all about authenticity here.
Right.
We don't play that game.
Right. But I will add to that is that I think while I said some of us we're willingly, but I think I'm hopeful. I'll say it that way. I'm hopeful that, and I'm an eternal optimist, I think sometimes, is that through all of this, I'll say it this way. I hope people are becoming more and more aware of their power and their voice and their ability to critically assess and evaluate what is being said and done to make the right decision and hold leadership accountable.
Right.
I think there's a lot of that happening. I think there is some I'm hopeful that will begin to happen, because without getting into the politics or the example, there is opportunities for change and growth on both sides, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So now we're going to transition to your specialty, DEI.
Okay.
And I want you to tell us and tell the audience what inspired you to pursue a career in DEI.
So, what I will say is, and my response has always been, diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been a part of my work, directly and indirectly. And I say that because I say this all the time, my very first job out of graduate school was working with a program. And it was a federal program through the U.S. Department of Education. Mm-hmm. The language used to be in the federal regulations. It's not in there anymore. It's either the regs or the regs. It was in the language of the program.
You mean the Federal Registry?
It's either I think it's not the federal. It was in the Federal Register or it was in the authorization, act, the actual act. And I used to be a trainer on this. I should know this. But anyway, the language was in there. They took it out to, oh God, I should know it verbatim, to provide programs and services conducive to create a supportive environment conducive to the success of first generation, low income, and students with disability. Now, that language was written in 1972. Mm-hmm. That statement is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging. That is it. Create an environment supportive to the success of first generation, low income, and students with disability. So I've been doing it. My first job out of graduate school was that. And so I have taken that and made that my personal sort of mantra and what I'm doing with my work is to create an environment where whoever I'm responsible for to their success, supportive of their success. And they had that identifying community that they belong to. So to answer your question, it's always been a part of my work. It just became popular, not popular, but it became more mainstream. I do think some folks may challenge this, but I think higher education addressed it more directly on explicitly more than other organizations. I don't know if we necessarily applied it appropriately, but we had great discussions about it and theories and all of that. And then business and industry decided to be a little more direct with it and more mainstream with it than they are now. They are more so now than they were in the previous periods. So, but I say that to say is that I've always been in this work. It's been crucial. My lived experience has shaped my approach to this work. True story. The reason why I decided to go into higher education and work with the population is because I didn't want fellow students and students behind me to have the similar experiences that I had. And so I was going to work within the systems that created so they can thrive. And so that was one of my motivations to doing it as well. My shared lived experiences was the motivation behind it as well.
Can you share a pivotal moment in your DEI journey that shaped your approach?
Early on, I'm gonna tell you, this is the early on, my first or second year on the job, and well, one of them. This is the one that's the most salient right now. I think it was my first or second year. I was working with a student who was. We had a process where they would get suspended if you didn't do well. You got suspended. But if you were suspended, you could write an appeal.
Mm-hmm.
You could write an appeal. And one of the jobs of mine was to provide support for that student, write a letter on their behalf, right?
Okay.
So I wrote a letter on their behalf to their college. And that director of that program with that student's major called me and said, I wasn't Dr. Childs at that time, but she said, Sidney, I'm a little concerned about this letter that you wrote on behalf of the student. And I said, why? I said, yeah, let's talk. And she said, well, I'm not sure I want to support this letter. And I said, why? Well, his academics were poor. And she said, well, and this happened to be a male student who happened to be Black. And she said, well, he didn't pass this, he didn't pass that. And he took Black studies and he didn't even pass Black studies. Let me tell you something. It came out of me so quick and I didn't even realize what I said until I said it. I said, so you mean until I said it just like this. I said, English is the form. I said English is the standard, is the language of this country. White students are not passing English. Should they not attend? I said, there are white students who clearly state they are of German ascent and blah, blah. I mean, I just went down. It just all came out. I said, I don't understand why you're making that analogy. I said, what are you talking about? I did. And that's when I knew I was in the right place. She said, wow. He's a Black student. He can't even pass. I said, what? I said, this is a white university. You mean every white student should pass? I said, every white student should flourish then. It was terrible, but I went there.
Right.
Now
You know
I
what?
got a little more refined and a little more sophisticated as I became more,
Right,
um, became more, got more experience.
right.
She called my boss
Mm-hmm.
and she said, I don't know what she said to my boss. And my boss said to me, well, she said, well, Sidney, yeah, such and such called me, blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, do you think she's racist? I said, I don't know if she's racist, but I know that comment was racist. It was inappropriate. And it's unrealistic. She said, oh. She said, yeah, I guess you do have a point. I said, yes. I said, then I'm big picture guy, right? I said, if these are the comments that we are making against Black and brown students, do you know what that means as an institution? We're responsible for retention. We can't be talking like this. I did. And I knew this was my work. This was my work. And I would have done it for any student, not just a Black student. That's how I'm wired.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really, so yeah, to answer your question, that is how I knew I was doing what I was doing.
Wow. You know something? I can just imagine the experience of dealing with some counterparts, in a lot of these universities, especially because I think when you're so privileged, you can't see the forest for the trees. With average individual like myself and you that identify, we can't hear that, but they can hear it. And so if they can hear that tree falling, which is privilege, which is also, excuse my French audience, but that's bullshit. But that's what they live by.
Right. And I think if her conversation, if her words and her rationale were different, we would have had probably a different conversation, and maybe the student might not have gotten back in. But
Exactly.
if she would have said, well, I'm really concerned about his performance. He didn't do well in all of these courses. And so I'm not sure if we're going to be setting this student up for failure. But the minute you went to race, the minute you showed your hand, and you didn't even, and to your point, you didn't even realize what you were saying until I told you that, until I said that to her. She didn't even, and think about the systems that are in place with that privilege, as you see. We weren't saying privilege then. We were saying, I don't know what we were saying then, but just think about that from a macro perspective. And that's really the core of what we're talking about when we do this, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging and all the other words that we're using. This is what we're talking about, is that people are sitting in power, positions of power, to make decisions about students, but you make provisions, different provisions for certain groups of students. And you don't even know you're doing it. And when we tell you you're doing it, you are bringing up race. No, you brought it up. No. Right. And I'm supposed to be a professional. I've been doing this for a while. Let me calm down.
No, but see, that is the thing. Is this because a lot of people can't actually have that frank conversation,
and they don't see it. What they see is, so we talk about in change management that there are people who, they're the way people, there's some people who welcome it. There's some people who have to grieve it. There's some people who get defensive with it. And most people, if you're going to be changing culture and changing systems, most people respond negatively, or they are defensive to it. And so the work is getting people to see it, where they're like, okay, first off, this is not a personal attack on me. However, I am purveyor of this system. I support it. I implement it, but it's not an attack on me. What you should do is go,
per se, not directly.
Not directly. But what we try to do in the DEI space is say,
Mm-hmm.
tell me more. Help me understand more. That's what we should be doing. It's saying, tell me more. Or
Right.
I tell people, say ouch. And let's be real. Let's say ouch. It hurt. Ooh. Now let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm. See, let me just tell you this, because I mean, I do believe in, just the opportunities for every individual, especially in a perfect world where everything was fair and there are no roses and everything is just what it is. Okay. So if we lived that way, then I think we would all be in different situations, because there would not be things that we would have to think and worry about. Now, I think because we have this situation the way it is right now, and because, Lord forgive me, but it's just the truth, but we have the little white girl in Texas that complained because her student loans couldn't be forgiven, okay, has caused everybody with student loans to have a problem, because they took it to the extremist Supreme Court to say that because her student loans couldn't be forgiven because she didn't qualify. Okay, they qualify for everything, so she should have qualified. But those that had to get these loans and grants to go to college should just have to pay back money.
Right.
And so again, this is why the attack on education is where it is right now. And so now that you have an enrollment down for Black students now, it's only going to get worse until a lot of our people in our communities get it in their heads. Take your ass to an HBCU, because they're the qualifications and the criteria and the things that they teach are at a much higher standard anyway.
Well, I don't.
You see, you don't have to go to some of these universities where it's all set and it's set to where it's easier for these people to pass, because this is for them to pass and to be so outstanding when they really are.
I don't know if I may. I don't know if I would characterize it as that much. I think generally, and probably more so, students who go to college
Mm-hmm.
do have the opportunity to pass at the same as others. So I don't want to make it seem as if
Well, that's the way it's set, quote
well,
unquote.
they do. I think they do, because I worked at multiple institutions. So I don't think the system is set up for Black students not to pass classes, or brown students, or whatever. I don't think that's set up.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is the challenge is that at many of our predominantly white institutions, we are still struggling to make an environment where Black students can be successful at their institutions. And what I mean by that is making sure that they have the experiences that they need to be successful, that they have faculty and staff who understand the complexities of race, who are culturally competent. And that may be, to your point, set up for them not to fail, because no one's learning and understanding that we have this diverse group of students coming to our campus, and we have faculty and staff who are of a certain generation and haven't made that adjustment to deal with these different types of people who are on their campuses. So, which in many cases impacts the retention and graduation of the students on campus. Now that doesn't, but I will say the alternative is, and I used to tell my friends all the time, send your child to a HBCU. And what I mean by that is, first year students have challenges irrespective of race gender, identity, class, what have you. They have challenges going to a new university, particularly and even more so if they are considered first generation or come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, right? Students have that in general. But if you go to a HBCU, you ain't necessarily going to be dealing with your transition because of your race.
Exactly, because you feel more comfortable.
You know that. And you're going to have your insecurities and your development issues as an 18-year-old or a traditional college student, going to college in general, being away from home. But it ain't because it ain't going to be because you're Black and you're around a sea of non-Black students. You're not dealing with that. At least I don't think you are. I've never worked at an HBCU. I have colleagues who work there, but that's not the issue. And let's be real clear. People who work at an HBCU probably are there because they want to be there. They want to teach there. They want to be an administrator there. And so they have, and I could be overgeneralizing, and I could be looking at HBCUs with rose-colored glasses. But what I would like to think is that you are working there because you want to be there. You want to develop the minds and shape the minds of the culture of the community. And so you're being cognizant about where you're. Now, that doesn't mean you're not being cognizant to want to work at a BGSU or whatever institution that you want to be. And I don't say one's work better than the other, but I'm saying that the motivation may be because you want to be with the community. You want to work the culture. You want to do that. You want to influence Black minds.
Right. And so, just to add to that before I ask you this next question is, my grandbaby, which, is having an experience right now in high school, getting ready to transition into college, wanted to go to one of those
PWIs,
universities and so forth. Now, the experience that she's had has made her say she is going to an HBCU.
Right.
And so I couldn't have been no more prouder than when I heard those words come out of her mouth, because that's her decision. Right. But of course, I've been trying to itch that for so long.
And this is not to disparage PWI institutions, because there are some PWIs that are, and PS and HSIs and what is it? PWI is predominantly white institution, Hispanic serving institutions, and minority serving institutions. There are some in every category that are getting it right. And there are some that are not getting it right. And I'm saying that without getting too disciplined or too higher ed-ish, is that we talk about this. We call it the enrollment cliff in higher ed. There is going to be a drop off of college-aged students being able to go to college. The pool of students are limiting. There is some thoughts out there that says the traditional pool is limiting, which is white, whatever. But the diverse pool is actually not so limited. And so that's where, if you didn't make the adjustment to deal with the incoming of more Black and brown students, you're troubling. And those institutions that are not doing well and making sure that they are prepared to bring in this population of students, they're going to falter. And we know who those students are. We know those institutions. All you have to do is go to the institutions, institutional research department and look at their fact book and look at the retention and graduation rates of Black and brown students. And if those rates are not as successful as they should be, there is something going wrong. There's something going on there, particularly if the gap is so wide. Now, if the gap,
and so that's why, like, a lot of them now are trying to act as though if they're trying to get ahead of the curve, and they're like sending out this message like, oh, Black enrollment's dropping. We need to do better. We need to find out what's going on. Y'all know what's going on.
And those people who are doing that now, they're 10, 20 years late. They are 10, 20 years behind the curve. You should have been having these
Right.
conversations at minimum 10 years ago. At
Exactly.
minimum 10 years ago. Some institutions were having it
Right.
a little early, who are a little forward thinking, but those who are if you are trying to make up for not being attractive to diverse populations today, I'm a little
Right.
concerned, because when you look at the political environment we are, the social environment that we are,
Mhm.
there is
That's one
research.
and
There
two.
is research out there there's data, I should say. There are data out there that say that there is still record enrollment at HBCUs right now.
Yes. Yes.
Record
And
enrollment.
it's actually gone up these last few years, as a matter of
Exactly.
fact.
Record enrollment. So, you know, if any of my higher ed colleagues out there are looking, you need somebody to come talk. No, I help you out. But no, seriously though, if you're doing that now, you're behind. You're behind. There should have been
Right.
levers. There should have been things in place to be prepared to create. And that's also why we have a backlash too to this diversity, equity, and inclusion work, is because on some level, those institutions that were getting it right were getting it right. And
Yes.
folks are like, oh my God,
Yes.
what is happening? What is happening?
Mhm.
What is happening? Which is why the Supreme Court issue was made, because somebody said, oh no, I got in and they got in and I didn't, and I'm supposed to. And so we got to do something about this. And they did something about it, which is horrible, but they did something about it.
Yes. Yeah.
Which means it's working. It's working.
Right. So, how do you measure the success of DEI initiatives in an organization?
That's a well, it's going to vary for the type of institution. I'm going to look at higher ed. I'm not going to look at private industry. I'm going to talk about higher ed. There's the metrics, the measurables. Black faculty and staff and student climate is where you want it to be. Whatever measures you have in place, the climate is good. People see themselves in the climate. They see themselves as being able to thrive. Students see themselves at the institution. They see how they whatever identity they're bringing to campus, they see it there. There's the identity centers. There's the LGBT resource room or center, or there's the intercultural or Black studies and Hispanic. There's all those things in place. Retention is where you're meeting your retention goals. You're meeting your enrollment goals. I didn't say quotas. I said goals. You're meeting your graduation goals. Your alumni engagement is at where you need it to be in terms of, we know there's data that say Black and Brown engagement and alumni is low because of their experience. So if you don't have a good experience, you ain't giving no money back. You're not doing that. And so if you have that engagement at the front end, you're going to get that engagement at the alumni stage. And when that's happening, like I said, the environment, the leadership, all the way from the top, even to mid, to even to, they are culturally competent, and it is valued. And your policies and procedures reflect an inclusive and an equity mindset. I know that's a lot, that's big stuff. But what I mean by that is a real simple example of equity mindset doesn't necessarily have to do with race, ethnicity, or gender, or any identity, is when our students come to our office, how about we employ a no wrong door approach to service to our students?
Right.
If you have a
Right.
significant number of first generation college students on your campus who are disproportionately Black, and they show up somewhere at a higher level than where they should, and you're frustrated as an administrator, as you have to be disrupted to help these students who don't know, or your perception of these students plays out, and you treat them accordingly because you are frustrated that you have to be disrupted. How about this? The student showed up. They're a member of our community. Maybe you can't help them, but you can stop and say, you know, let me think about that, and I can direct you to this. And in fact, I'm gonna call them and let them know you are on your way. You're at the wrong office. I can't help you, but I can tell you who you should talk to. Now, guess what? That's an equity approach. But guess what? It helps every student, not just Black students, every student. And
Yep.
maybe it disproportionately helps Black and brown students. Maybe you have a policy that disproportionately helps Black and brown students, but it's going to help white students because guess what? It's a predominantly white institution. So guess who's going to benefit it in numbers more so? White students. And let's be okay to have that conversation and say it.
Well, we know that we're not going to have that conversation and not going to say that because they don't want the wrong thing to come out of that mouth that's going through that mind and that brain.
But that's why you build in what we call what I call inclusive excellence training, whether it be communication, whether it be intercultural communication, whether it be understanding what microaggressions are, or implicit bias. All of those things play into that to help your staff become more competent, or I call inclusive excellence in their approach, to be able to help students navigate the campus in a safer and belonging way. And no one expects you to have all the answers and be right all the time, but be prepared to not have it and be told, okay, we got to make something. It's built in. Now, that is a slow roll that does not happen overnight. We like to say you got to crawl before you walk, but you got to be open to the long game. That's why I said I didn't want to deal with business and industry, because business and industry wants bottom line today, tomorrow. And if you want to do DEI right, you've got to be in for the long haul.
Yep.
That's why I was different. Yeah. So that, even, I mean, just a whole lot of things.
What are some common challenges you face in implementing DEI strategies?
The biggest one is getting people to helping individuals know that, or that nuance between changing who they are as individuals, or helping them understand that this is the organization's values. And what I mean by that is, if diversity, equity, and inclusion is done right from an organizational perspective, it is being done based off the values of the institution, based off of the priorities of the institution. It is not a exercise in changing who you are as an individual. And some of my colleagues may not agree with me on that, and I'm okay with that. It's not about changing you as a person. Now, if that happens, wonderful. That's great, because that's development. But if it doesn't, and you choose not to adhere to these policies or these thoughts and this trainings or whatever we have going on, you will adhere to them when you are here, when you come to work, or when you become a part of this organization. You will. These are the things that we espouse to have as an organization. So when you engage with our stakeholder, whether it be a student, whether it be a client, whether it be whatever, a community member, this is how we're going to operate. And if you choose not to, and you want to be aligned to this organization, and you choose not to, you might need to think about another organization.
Right.
But what most people see DEI as is an indication that they are bad individuals, and we are going to change them and tell them that they need to be nice to Black people. And we're going to make you nice to Black people. And my DE colleagues are probably saying, no, he's not doing all of this. But that is how I see this work, is that it's not about that. It's about creating a culture and identifying strategies to make whoever comes to our organization see themselves in a way that says, I want to come back. I want to be re-engaged with you. I want, and we hit every whatever? No. But what we will do is present the environment that we're open to it. That we want to have these. We want you to know that this is about you, and we're not just taking your dollar.
Well, look, in a perfect world, that would happen, but we're not in that perfect world. I think we can
aspire to it. And maybe I'm looking at rose-colored glasses. There are organizations that aspire to do that.
There's a lot of Fortune 500 companies that were aspiring to do that, but when the events that took place in November of 2024, the majority of them quickly switched.
Well, now you talking about the Supreme Court decision?
No. I'm talking about that presidential election.
Well, I would say the majority of them, majority of those companies who made, I would say maybe, and I'm gonna put it in air quotes, may have been a little disingenuous in their efforts, or maybe being cosmetic or in their efforts. When the Supreme Court decision came out about colleges and universities, they took that upon themselves to say that means us too. And it had nothing to do with business and industry. It's only about admissions. But they used that Supreme Court, they extrapolated and or rode that wave of, oh my God, we can't do this anymore. Well, they probably weren't committed to it in the first place. I did see some data. I don't think they were. I read somewhere where there is some data out there that says companies privately have put additional resources in the work. They're just not calling it. I read somewhere, I can't remember what article I read, but there is something that it may not, it's presented one way, but it's not as, it's real. Don't get me wrong. It's real, but I think there's still some effort to do it for those companies who want to do it right.
So tell us, how do you ensure that DEI efforts are sustainable and not just a trend?
It's built into the policies and procedures. It's built into it's operationalized. It's operationalized in the way that you are asking the questions of who's not at the table, why aren't they at the table, and let's bring them to the table. And that is, and that's an ongoing question that you have, right? I think the fly-by-night programs and the flash in the pan we're just doing a whole bunch of programs. We're going to do a whole bunch of identity programs. We're going to celebrate this month and that month. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be done, but if that's your only effort to increase in diversity, or if that's your only DEI effort, that's not sustainable if you want to truly do change management. I would even go so further to say, if your only effort is employee resource groups, ERGs, and if those ERGs aren't able to give feedback and speak truth to power as it relates to the organization, then it's not going to be. I don't think it's sustainable. I think it's a flash in the pan. It's a more lengthy flash in the pan, and it allows people to go to sleep at night and say, "I'm doing the right thing." But I think it's got to be. It needs to be a little more sustainable. And I also will say that DEI is flash in the pan if your efforts are only looking at your consumers in terms of making your product be more, but you're not worried about the people who are doing the work. There are some folks who are really some organizations. Some approach is oftentimes, let's do all the nice, pretty things for them, the consumer. Let's make sure the consumer wants to keep buying our product, but the maker of the product is suffering in silence because you're not taking care of them. You're not making them
right.
They don't feel like they belong, but you pay them well, maybe incentives, maybe, but as an organization belonging, is that really happening? So I would say the sustainable ones is being operationalized and creating the notion of inclusive excellence and staying true to building it in the corporate values and priorities, and resources are connected to those initiatives. You can tell a person, or you can tell an organization's values by looking at their checkbook. And if their checkbook or balance sheet or budgets aren't going then it's not going to be sustainable, because when times get hard, what's going first.
Let me ask you this, and this is probably my only follow-up to what we're talking about and discussing now. But can you tell me this? Like, this country, every state, every local county and state government has what they call a charter, which is how they operate. These higher institutions of learning, do they operate by a charter?
So, yes, institutions of higher have a charter. So if you are a land grant institution, you have a charter because you are a land grant institution, which at the end of the day is really about educating the community. Okay. So,
and
so
then now this is my point. This is why I asked that question, is because now, if the parents really had an interest in the places in which their kids are going to these schools, they will be seeking these charters, because in these charters, I can guarantee you that the language may have changed maybe by 3 to 5 words over the last 30 years to make it seem like they're changing for the better. But if you read those charters, I can guarantee you that they're not included.
I don't know if I can speak to that. I will say that I don't have a lot of experience of knowing when institutions are changing charters, particularly your public institutions. It's hard to change an institution's public. I haven't seen it. Private institutions I can see maybe, but I would go a little further in terms of, and maybe I'm going more of the affordability piece, is that we would not be having this challenge about higher education if there was a disincentive of supporting higher education. We divested, many states divested from contributing to higher education in their states. So like here in the state of Ohio, 20 years ago, maybe 25, 30 years ago, 70% of the institutional's budget came from the state. Today, it's the opposite. 70% of the budget for the institution comes from parents, family. It's on the backs of families. And the state is maybe giving 23, 25%. So when you disinvest in higher ed and you make it a commodity, as a colleague of mine calls it. Then you get into this. You get into these matters of competition and capital. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. So you know what I mean? And so guess what? I'll say it this: in order for a capitalist system to work, you have to have winners and losers. And so who typically loses in a capitalist society? You're minoritized, you're disenfranchised individuals, which is why we're in this conversation about higher education. But there is a glimmer of hope. I don't know where I'm putting all this data, and I'm not resourcing it, I'm not citing it anywhere, but the demographic who is the most educated in the United States right now is what?
African Americans.
Women. African American women are the most educated demographic in the US right now. Now, I am not a demographer. I am not what are those people who look at, project out in terms of, actuarial statisticians do all that stuff. If Black women are the most educated, and we all know there's data that says the college degree is still one of the highest, one of the best indexes to move up in social mobility. So if you're going to have education, Black women, highest educated, which means levers of power, all kinds of things, and you want to create barriers now to make it even more so, follow the money. So
we're not going to I'm gonna cut this off at this point because we've got to have you back.
Oh, would love to.
I've got to have you back. And so just so we can get to this point, just to wrap up, is there anything you'd like to leave with the audience, especially contact information, how to follow you, all of that good stuff, so they can know how they can contact Dr. Sidney Childs?
You can contact me. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I had a lot of fun. I hope I said anything that was edifying to anybody. I'm I grew up in the Pentecostal sensibility that one person was helped, I did my job. So if one person was helped, I'm grateful and thank you. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation with the community and culture. If you'd like to contact me, I am on LinkedIn. It's Sidney Childs. I'm on Instagram. I think it's SidRob522, and Facebook is just Sidney Childs. And I am open to opportunities for consultations and or speaking engagements about and strategic consultations and speaking engagements related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, change management, current topics. So you can reach me that way. My email is sidrob522@gmail.com. And thank you all who stayed around to listen to me go on. And I appreciate it and hope you all have a blessed and remain blessed in this new year.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Childs, for being here because, this truly was another great enlightening show, as well as the conversation itself was more than just stimulating, but it was something that I'm sure that it lays fruit for thought for everybody that's out in the targeted communities that we target, that they can understand that there are some things that they need to do in order to make their lives better, make their lives different. And those of you that actually are still around and watching, I want to thank you. But also I want to thank Dr. Childs because everything that we mentioned today is more than just thought provocatism. It is the real deal. And for those of you that really honestly are looking to better your life and knowing that you want to make some changes, take these things as more than just fruit for thought, but you need to make them in actionable plans to move forward. There are more resources out there that you can reach for, and actually that's why we are here at America in Black and White. Please reach out if you still have questions or concerns, because our thing is to build, expand, and connect communities. So we're all about the upward mobility. We just want you to do the same. So those of you that still stuck around, I want to thank you. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, please do us a favor and support us by subscribing, hitting the notifications button. And please, if you want to watch the show live every time, if you need to go back and watch that show or any other show, you will be able to watch all the shows. But please follow us, because we have got some enlightening things for you here in this year 2025 going forward, because our interest is you. Thank you again, Dr. Charles. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please join us again tomorrow for another great show. And we will see you guys tomorrow and forever and forever. Drop us some comments. And I want to thank you again. And I'll definitely be in touch with you, because we definitely want to have you